Well, good evening, brothers and sisters. We welcome you to our second forum tonight. For those of you who may not know who I am, my name is Mike O'Neill, and I'm chairman of the board of Heritage 21 Foundation, and glad to welcome you tonight to our second forum. These forums are sponsored by and organized by the Heritage 21 Foundation and by the Christian Chronicle. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Heritage 21 Foundation, it is a private foundation that's been organized about 5 or 6 years ago by a number of brethren who noticed that we were having a lot of congregations that were declining. And so we felt that there was a need for assisting and advising those congregations that are struggling to make healthy decisions. But as the events of the last 16 months or so have unfolded, we've realized that we needed to even broaden some of the things we were doing. And one of those is to be helping our fellowship in just about any way that we are able to do with how to navigate the coming out of the the COVID, and to help our churches to do that in a good and healthy way. And so these forums are a part of that effort. The Christian Chronicle, I hope all of you are familiar with, of course, is our journal in the Churches of Christ. And its mission is to inform and inspire and to unite those of us in the Churches of Christ. And so we're glad to have both of those organizations as our sponsors for these forums. And let me also thank tonight Lipscomb University that's providing this technological platform so that we can have as many people as we might not be able to have if they did my free Zoom account. So we're glad and grateful for Lipscomb University and Caleb Hendrick there. These forums are designed as a way to help leaders in the Churches of Christ to share what we've experienced, to talk about our concerns and our fears and our hopes, to talk about what we've learned through these last several months, and how perhaps this pandemic has changed us as individuals and changed us as well as congregations. The first forum was held on April the 29th, and it was entitled Uncovering the Short-Term and Long-Term Impact of the Quarantined Church. And that included some good, robust, and insightful discussion about where we've been and what we've experienced. And it helped us a little bit to gauge kind of the feelings, whether hopes or despair of church leaders. But the one tonight is the second one in what is a monthly series that will happen on the fourth Thursday of every month now through August. And we hope tonight to be exploring a little bit more what congregations are now doing to kind of redefine what normalcy is and how they're planning to emerge stronger, we hope, and more focused on the true mission of the church. We're all acutely aware that our fellowship was declining precipitously before COVID. And our prayer is that rather than accelerate that decline, that Churches of Christ will emerge stronger and more focused on what the church is all about, and focused on God's plan rather than my plan or any of our individual plans. So these forums, as I indicated, are the fourth Thursday. If you want to look at what the future forums are about, the topics are listed on our website. which is www.heritage21.org. I assume you've all been there since you're signed up. I think you had to go there to get signed up. The intention is that these forums will be as interactive as you can in this medium. One of our trustees, Blair Bryan, will be monitoring the chat box. So as you have comments, questions, input you'd like to give, he will try to help get those to us as we need them. We also welcome your emails and calls at any time. As we said at the last one, our sponsors and the panelists tonight, we don't claim to have all the prescriptions or the correct answers. We rather want to just hear each other and learn from each other. We don't know what the final outcome will be on these forums, but our prayer is that they will strengthen our fellowship and help our congregations be more effective in shaping our lives in the image of Jesus. The topic of today's forum is Reconnect, Re-engage, and Re-energize church members. The moderator for this forum is one of the trustees of Heritage 21, Dr. Stan Granberg. Dr. Granberg, many of you are familiar with him. He is a minister. He's a former Christian University professor. He was the founder of Kairos Church Planting. He's a researcher and scholar about our fellowship, and he has degrees from Harding and from Fuller and Oxford. He is joined by a terrific panel for our discussion tonight, and he will now introduce those panelists to you and start this forum. So, Dr. Granberg.
Oh, thanks, Mike. Good to see all of you tonight. I recognize some, so we got people from all over the country. And I think that's a great representation. What's fun about these, as we've talked about it with our Heritage 21 group, is that we're all in real time in this. Since the last time we met, the CDC has opened us up and said if you have your full vaccination shots, you can go around without a mask. In Arkansas, I think we beat them a little bit because it seems like we canceled COVID about 3 weeks ago from the appearance of everybody. But it just really, it means a big difference in how people are beginning to feel about their life. So, but there's still a lot of edge to life. And as we get into tonight's topic, we're looking on how do we re-engage people in our ministry. And in our specific church, Southwest Church of Christ in Jonesboro, the last 3 weeks have seen an increase in attendance every week. There's a much greater excitement that we're feeling. And I think from the staff level, there's a good sense of being able to finally plan for the future. Because a year ago, it was almost impossible, it felt like, to make any plans. But now the plans are coming into place. And so people are feeling a bit more confident about things. So right before we get started, have some PowerPoints. So Caleb, if you'd get those up. As Dr. O'Neill mentioned, that I've been a researcher through the years, and particularly numerically about our fellowship. And I did a church growth study of our fellowship focused on years 2006 to 2016. But it went back all the way to the beginning of our fellowship. And this chart you're showing, it's the precipitous drop is not quite as big as you would think. If it was algorithmic and showed us, down to zero, it wouldn't be near as steep. But what it does show is we hit our peak about 1985. That's the time we had left in 1983 to go to Kenya, spent 10 years in Kenya. When we came back, it definitely felt like there had been a shift in the tide. And since then, that's kind of continued. So next slide, Caleb. Then in 2019, Tim Woodruff and we did some extrapolation to say if we took our decline rate and extrapolated it out to 2050 and gave it a worst case scenario. So that's what this is. It's a worst case scenario. Here you can see that it really is it would be a very, very difficult situation. Worst case in 2050, we could drop from about 1.2 million people to 200,000 members. That's just hard to comprehend. But yet we've seen groups that have done pretty much similar to that. And so get the next one, Caleb. Here's a church I've been following for a number of years, and I took their numbers away so you don't have to see what size they are. But here's what our attendance was like in this particular church, and you see COVID hit. So there was that very slow decline, and then COVID was big, and then advance it, Caleb. There's the trend line, and then advance it again. And there was 2020 in a micro. So you can see right where we had to shut down. So it went down to 0, and then we opened up. And then as they went along, things began to kind of climb up and down. And at this point, this particular church seems to be mirroring the major story of almost every good, healthy church in America. They're kind of running about 60 to 70%. And so how many people will come back? That church, their anticipation is that it will be after Labor Day when they'll really know what the full impact of COVID has been. But they are moving ahead and pushing things forward. And so I wanted to share that with you in one way to show some disparity between the micro level and the macro level. Macro, a lot of churches are actually feeling very confident on the micro and that micro level. On the macro level, we've got to make some decisions of what we're going to do. So I wanted to share those numbers with you so you just have them in mind. But let me introduce our panelists for tonight. These are 3 very good men from very different situations. So Joe Roberts, Joe, raise your hand. Joe he's been a preaching minister for most of his career. He's also been in education. He is currently the campus and groups minister for the North Boulevard Church of Christ in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. They're about 2,500 members, and they have come out of COVID very, very well. Keith Castleman. Keith, raise your hand. Keith is from Northwest Arkansas in Fayetteville area. He's the preaching minister for the Cornerstone Church of Christ. When I first met Keith, he was at the Baldwin Church of Christ, same church. In the meantime, they've changed their name as they've restarted things. And they were a small church. I think they were kind of on a good Sunday running 80 members when we started, and they have made some good pushes forward. And then Wesley Leonard. Wesley is the preaching minister for the Southside Church of Christ in Orlando. And he has grown that church up to about 400 members and has a very active and dynamic group and ministry down there. So we have a few different parts of the country and different sizes of congregations represented. So we're going to start tonight. I'd like each one of them to give us a quick back look at their church. Where were they before COVID? What was their vision, their ethos? What were they thinking about as COVID hit? And then we'll go into a little recap of the quarantine experience, and we'll spend the bulk on what they've been doing past quarantine. So let's start with Joe, and then we'll go to Keith and then Wesley, and give us a little backstory on your church.
I'd be happy to, Stan, and thanks for having us. We're North Boulevard in Murfreesboro, is not far from Nashville. We're a multi-site church and multilingual church. We have very focused on our group ministries, small group ministries. We're about 2,000 in worship attendance right now, at that time. with a healthy giving. And we were beginning a New Day vision here near and far just before the pandemic hit. We had just finished a Think Small campaign for our small group ministry, discipleship group ministry. We have about 150 groups that are foundational to what we do here at North Boulevard. We have 40 member-led ministries. Member-led is just exactly what it sounds like, members that lead ministries here that we recognize. And we have about 20 ministries that are led by paid staff that do these ministries, such as Celebrate Recovery, etc. And our ethos matches exactly what we're trying to do as a congregation. Our ethos is simply, we all love Christ, we love Scripture, and we love people. And since discipling relationships are so important to us, our ethos matches and fuels, if you will, that particular flame. Our vision and dreams has not changed. Neither is our ethos. None of this has changed for us in reality, except maybe accelerate some things. Our vision is to be a part of a worldwide awakening where every person on earth has an opportunity to say yes to King Jesus. So we seek to be in disciple-making relationships with every tribe, every tongue, every nation, every language, just like you'd read about in Revelation. And we are have dreamed for several years now of planning over 60,000 churches. And right now, post-pandemic, we're well on our way. So that's a little about us.
Keith.
Wow, Joe, thank you very much, Stan, for putting me behind Joe. That's quite a thing to go after. That's impressive, Joe. We were a small church. We've been around, the Baldwin Church of Christ has been around for over 120 years. And with that, the dynamics of the church started to change back in about 2014. We went to one of Stan's trainings on a church plant, but also to reinvigorate and regrow the church. We had the same very, very good minister for 43 years, and he retired. And so it was a time to look at new things and new strategies and just revision where the church was going. And Stan helped us do that. And we came up with some new goals for the church and new visions for the church. And that was to really engage every member into a ministry. And we called everyone, we wanted everyone to be able to quickly verbalize what their ministry was. And so we were going about getting everyone engaged, and we became a very service-oriented church, and our membership started growing. Our average age when I arrived was somewhere around 70, 71, 72. Our average age today is probably somewhere around 28, 27. When I first came to the church, my son, who was 5 years old, was the only child under the age of 5. Now we have 15 under the age of 5. We were running, before COVID, we were running somewhere averaging a little over 100 per week. And so now we're up to about 80% of that. Because of our broadcast and the restrictions and the age of some of our older people, they're still at home, and we really don't expect to see them return. But the young people keep coming and adding on, and we're growing the old-fashioned way. We're having babies, which is just a beautiful thing for a church that is 120 years old. But the new challenge is to re-engage in service, re-engage everyone into a ministry after a year of really just a respite.
Thank you. Wesley.
Well, again, I echo the sentiments of my colleagues. Thank you, Stan, for the invitation to share. like faith. Our congregation is a young congregation. The congregation is 21 years old. And I came here in the year 2000, and we started with 8 people in an elementary school, moved to a middle school, and then we built an edifice. And God has blessed us in a mighty, mighty way. We've grown to well over 400 members. We had just began a seismic shift in the direction of our church. The elders and I had schemed together with our vision, and our goal was to get a healthier church. We always want to evangelize and grow the church, but we were putting emphasis not on being a bigger church, but a healthier church. We needed healthier families, healthier relationships, healthier marriages, health, ministry, just doing better, being better. Our attrition rate was much too high. So we were focusing on that when the pandemic hit. And what I decided to do, and the elders and I decided to frame this to the church as a test of our faith. It was a blessing in disguise. It put to the test what we've been teaching people, that God is in the people and God is not in the steeple. We had gotten to be too much of a sanctuary church, that too much of what we were doing was centered around the building, the sanctuary. And once COVID hit and destroyed that ethos, if you will, it forced us to do things a little bit more non-conventional, yet probably more effective. So, we just kind of framed it to the church, and still are, that the devil meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. And so what we've done is teach this a faith test, because faith does not change what you see. Faith changes how you process what you see. So we framed it that way. So we've been relatively successful during the last 14 months throughout the pandemic of hardly losing anyone. The members have been faithful online with attendance, online with their giving, online with attending ministry meetings and fellowship meetings and prayer meetings. So we have been relatively successful through the pandemic. Now, as we come out, we're challenged with the best way to go forward. And I think that's what the forum is about. And I'm looking forward to sharing like faith with these gentlemen and beyond, that we can all, because this is uncharted territory. We've not been this way before. So we're going to have to lean on each other, learn from each other, support each other as we come out of this pandemic.
So when you look back at the height of the pandemic, when we were locked out of buildings, and then as we begin to come out, what were some key points, some lessons, some significant insights that you gained from that time?
Flexibility is key.
Say that again, Keith.
Flexibility is key. To remain flexible, to focus on what is possible versus the what you can't do. Focus on what you can do, and remain extremely flexible in everything you think about. Was really good for getting us, breaking us out of our little worship box that we had put ourselves into.
I support that. I underestimated the emotional toll that would have on the church. I could anticipate the spiritual toll. What I mean by the emotional toll, we had many members get married or had funerals. And of course, that did not afford us, the quarantine and the COVID crisis did not afford us to have the usual celebration, whether it's graduation, whether it's a wedding, or the usual funeral where people can come together and be a support system. Even our sick members, you could not visit them at the nursing home or the hospital. Even the folk who contracted and died from COVID, died alone, basically, because you could not go and support them. And that was an emotional toll that I didn't anticipate. I just didn't think that out. So, as Keith stated, it taught us to be flexible, new ways to stay in touch and kind of be a support. And it changed things, and it made me more sensitive to the emotions of people. You then got to move from book, chapter, and verse to deal with the actual human spirit of people. That does not change because you're a Christian.
It was a really good call to your leadership at your church as an all hands on deck kind of a thing, learning to be collaborative and especially creative. For what Keith and Wesley have said, there was a lot of folks going through a lot of things. So what I was really impressed with here, what I've seen and witnessed, is number one, because we had such strong small groups already in place, we were able to maintain connections fairly well, which was a real blessing to us. As far as I know right now, out of all the families we've called, I think we've only lost about 3 families from this pandemic, going through that. I think something else that I saw that I found interesting is that a lot of our ministries, like our youth ministry, our children's ministry, or even our adult education ministries, became very creative in reaching out to their different groups and trying to maintain those connections. I was really happy with our elders and our deacons and ministers and staff in making pastoral calls, periodic pastoral calls at least every other week, trying to maintain connection, see how people are doing in their lives. And it was pretty challenging to do all that. I think too, communication was pretty key for us. Having our senior minister and our elders start to give weekly announcements via Zoom or on our website so that they could hear a little bit about what's going on, letting them know that your leaders care about you, they love you, I think was reassuring and reaffirming and positive. And so they were finding out we were going to weather this storm together.
The loss of the human touch is what I was trying to speak to.
Yeah.
We tried to do what Joe and North Boulevard was doing. I underestimated how important it was to our people to actually touch people.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could talk to them. We could see them on Zoom. Yeah. I underestimated how important that fellowship, that koinonia, the actual embrace, the brotherly love, the touch, the hug, the heavenly kiss. That was so much more important to my people and depressing to them to lose that. They could talk to us. They could see us, they could visualize us, but that actually flesh to flesh was so much more important, as I think the Lord intended. It was more important. So we scrambled with that aspect. We had some members who went off into the abyss of depression because of the isolation. And like I heard, I think it was Keith, we have members, the elder, they probably will never be back to the church, to the building. But what we can do now, since Florida's opened up a little bit before some of the rest of you, we can go to them. They can't come to us, but we can go to them in small numbers and protect them. But they need to see us. They need to feel us. They need to touch. And that was something I did not fully understand until this crisis hit.
You know, a lot of our groups, thanks for sharing that, Wesley. A lot of our groups since that, and our small groups would actually gather together for brunch and watch the worship assembly at each other's homes. And they made a covenant that, you know, they were only going to be together with just them and not with others to protect themselves, which was wise, but just a lot of them just did that on their own. That's how powerful what you're saying, Wesley, really is.
We're finding now, Wesley, that giving opportunities for just fellowship is really paramount with our people. We're starting our Wednesday nights back, but one Wednesday night per month, we just come together to share in a fellowship meal. So far, we've had that outside, and we had about 85% of our congregation show up for just a Wednesday night fellowship meal, and they stayed forever. We had to remind them, hey, you got homes to go back to. We got to shut this thing down. We got to put everything up. But just watching people share, and as you said, Wesley, just walk up and give hugs, handshakes, fist bumps. People who hadn't seen each other for 12 months coming up and just talking for 30 minutes to an hour at a time, because they miss that so much, that interaction so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It may be time to reinstitute greet one another with the holy kiss. Let's do one more question on reflecting back on the quarantine experience. What things did you, on reflection now, you're looking at it, do you think you're going to leave behind that you maybe had been doing pre-COVID? Well, what's not going to serve your congregation moving forward, and so you're going to leave it behind?
Good question.
Yeah.
I'm waiting on Keith or Joe.
Oh, well, thanks. I'll get it started. That's where I can get in trouble, because we've made our assemblies, what we'll leave behind us are some of the things the way we did worship. For example, passing communion. We don't pass communion anymore. It's now, I guess you're ever going to forever be with those little cups. And it actually serves us well to do that. We could sing more songs. We could spend more time together. So we've made our assemblies a little tighter and giving ourselves more opportunities to engage in each other's lives. That's just one quick thing I'm thinking of that we've done. We will never not be online anymore, though we will try to make micro churches from other places, and I guess we'll talk about that later, that have connected with us.
Yes. I echo that. We've streamlined our worship, our services. If you had to characterize it, we trimmed the fat, and it's more lean. We online services have been 50 minutes or less. And one thing I studied and researched was that we have a millennial church, much like Keith has now. The median age at Southside is 28 to 45. And we have a sprinkling of seniors and a pretty good contingency of young people with that demographic, with children with that demographic. The one thing that's important to a millennial is their time. If you research, that's not one thing important to a millennial, is their time. And so this has afforded us to see the importance of streamlining our service, that we can be more condensed, concise, to the point. Of course, there's nobody giving anymore. I'm passing collections. There's nobody passing communions. There's not an array of singers parading back and forth, announcers, and someone's leading this and leading that. So it's kind of heightened our awareness of the importance of being more tight and condensed. So we left behind some of the, I would say, rigmarole that we had going on. And so that's something that's been a blessing to us, really. It has. And COVID kind of revealed that to us.
That's good.
It has caused us to focus, to practice, and to prepare, because we're online. And it's really caused us to focus on what goes on during that hour, where before we were a little more lax in our presentation. It has really focused us and made us keenly aware of the time that we have together and making the absolute most of it. And like you said, Wesley, we don't pause for 30 seconds for somebody to walk from the back of the church all the way to the front of the church and then find a microphone and then start his prayer. We've got cues for people now, and they're coming up right on cue, and the worship is much more eloquent because it has focused us on what we're doing, which has been really positive. Stan, it's not what we're leaving out. I guess that's what we're adding to a level of professionalism across the board, and a real focus on what happens during that hour.
Very good. Let's take just a brief pause here. We've got 3 poll questions tonight. So Caleb, let's put up that first poll question that gets us thinking about where we were. So coming out of COVID, what percentage of attendance are you having at your weekly worship compared to pre-COVID? So attendance at your weekly worship is what percent of your pre-COVID average attendance?
Yeah, that's a great question. My situation is a little unique, probably, Brother Stan. Being an African-American church, we've had the challenge of low vaccinations. You hear about those numbers. There's some stigmas that our people still deal with. We even had an event scheduled at our church where the members can come to the church, be vaccinated, and they're still hesitant for whatever reason. There's a plethora of reasons. So with the attendance, we have not officially opened the gathering. But here's the good news. Again, COVID taught me this. And back to what Keith said before, my IT team had to teach me, hey, preacher, this is a production. For lack of a better word, it's a TV show. Okay. So you cannot have, as Keith said, people waiting 45 seconds and these lulls in your service. So it tightened it up. The good news for us, because of the online presence, because the in-person presence of our young people and being the African-American church, we were not comfortable opening with low numbers of vaccinations. That may be different dynamics other places. That's why it's good to hear from different genres. Our vaccinations in our precinct is still very low. So we could not just open readily like other people. But the good news was we went from 400 a week in-house before COVID, and with all of our Facebook, YouTube channel, website, and our app, we average now, when the dust settles, almost 2,600 people a week accessing our programs from around the globe. So I don't know how to accurately answer that. Our attendance is up. In-house is down, but our overall viewership and exposure to people and the gospel of Christ is up exponentially.
Well, that's what we want to do here. That's awesome. Wonderful. So let's move in. We'll just give it another minute to answer that poll question, and then Caleb will get it up. But think about, so what are we doing here? We've moved into that now, but what are we adding to? What are we bringing in that's new? Southwest Church, we went from I called it a stealth praise team. We've had a praise team for years, but it sat down. And it just looks better when the stage had the praise team up on the stage visually in the TV. And so that's something we've added and kept to things because it looks better and it brings a bigger sense of voices instead of having that one worship leader up there and that's all you hear. Now you get to hear that praise team singing. And so that's been something that we've added.
We were the same, Stan. We had that stealth team, and then as we had no one present and everyone online, it was just natural to move everyone to the stage. So there was a congregational singing feel to the worship, and so that's a positive thing for us also.
We pretty much did the same thing, except our first assembly, we still have a stealth praise team, if you want to call it that. But the second assembly, which is the one we put online, they're on the stage. I think one of the other things that has been helpful to us is the richness of our worship by, as we've talked about already, making it tighter, moving just from a meaningful prayer. It's just synchronized so well with the lesson and the prayers and the praise all go together. And that's been really, really vibrant and rich for us.
Yeah. Same here, Joe. We realized the optics of online presence.
Mm-hmm.
And we would never, like you guys, we would never go back to not being online. Our services will be in person and online. But the optics matter. So our praise team has been on stage for a while, but we even enhanced it more because it was important for people to see, not just hear, because when you're watching and you're not in person, the more you see, the more attentive you're likely to become. So that's been very helpful to us.
I'd also like to remind the ministers that your welcome center or your foyer has moved out of your building and is now online.
Yeah.
And first perceptions and the perception of the personality of your church is now being taken in online. And how you present that is a determining factor whether those people will come through your door. We hardly have anyone come through our door that's visited us in the last 3 months who didn't either go online and find us online and get a feel for our personality online, or didn't find us on Facebook, or didn't find us on YouTube. They all knew what to expect before they ever walked through the door, and that made them feel comfortable in the personality that our church had.
You know, Keith, that's a really important point, and that's why we have kind of, for lack of a better word, a pre-show where we have one of our ministers, or actually a male, female, that are online prior to worship, giving updates, and they're actually interacting with the audience, and we have people interacting with those that are online. They could ask questions, and we get prayer requests. So there's a lot of follow-up that happens with that. We do it before our assembly and after our assembly. We have the minister come back at the end, and he gives his big three. What's your takeaway? So it's a really good connect, but the connection is not good unless you do a lot of good follow-up. And so having that follow-up is really important too.
Excellent point, Keith. I echo that. Our staff and our deacons and our leadership are involved in the chat section of our broadcast, and we're constantly welcoming people. And if we notice someone log on who we don't know or not familiar with us, we reach out to them, we engage them, we try to get information. And we've been very blessed nationwide and even globally to have people who are not members of the church, really not even members of any church, more or less the Church of Christ, who've engaged us and love it, and have been contributors. But we do engage. I love Keith's point about your welcome center is not in your foyer anymore. It's online. And you just use the technology we have. Now you got to engage them still, but it's not in person. And millennials and a lot of people still respond well to that. So,
well, one other thing I wanted to mention, and you guys can probably relate to this. I never imagined before COVID that I would ask people to take out their phone and share the worship service on Facebook. And I have found that there is a direct correlation to how many minutes are watched by how many shares that people put out per week of your video. And we're finding when that happens, the numbers jump up, the minutes watched may jump up 1,000 minutes per week.
Mm-hmm.
I thought you were gonna say take your wallets out, or because there's giving online. What's have y'all been doing with your giving, and how have you brought online giving up to the fore?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Wesley.
Our contribution has increased. I would say at least 15% during the crisis, because we have such broader audience, and there are people contributing, and it's online. Of course, it's all online. I would say to what Keith said as well, if, we have a share challenge, and I would encourage you guys to do innovative stuff like we challenge. Remember that share he's talking about on Facebook.
Mhm.
Who can get the most shares in a week?
Mhm.
Friends, family, co-workers, neighbors. So we've even done like every Sunday there's a different challenge. Invite your neighbor. Next week, second Sunday, invite a friend. Third Sunday, invite a co-worker.
Mhm.
Fourth Sunday, invite a family member. So we get in these shared challenges, and that tends to, and it's kind of a little fun, yet it's effective at the same time because people want to have the most shares. Who got the most people in their pool of shares? And so you come up with these little innovative ways to help broaden your footprint, if you will. All of this because of COVID. For us, none of this was applicable before COVID. So it's kind of helped us to refocus the goal of sharing the gospel.
Amen.
Yeah, we've got another poll question. Caleb, get that one up if you would. So this has two pieces to it. So number one, what's your most likely growth scenario 1 year from now? So we're looking at 1 year. Where do we think we're going to be? And then number two on that, what factors do you see as most impacting your answer above? So let's take a moment and fill those out. And then we'll pull the answers to those up in about 5 minutes. Well, I'm hearing a lot of excitement from you three guys that it seems like COVID has increased your sense of imagination and innovation in order to work around the challenges. I'm going to speak to that a little bit.
Well, Stan, just in the refocusing of how we're going to break out of things. I mean, we kind of feel like at the church that we're out of the tunnel and we're breaking into the light, and it's making us rethink how we're going to do things. And just today we're emailing each other. The leadership is emailing each other in new thought processes of making corporate worship time a little shorter and adding on more fellowship time and small group time to study the word with people, because we're finding more and more lost people coming to church and really getting a good grasp of community and the will of God. That's pretty hard just in a sermon. So we're going to take away some of our corporate worship time and then massage that into developing relationships and small groups that we're going to break right out of our corporate worship and go right into that. And I got to tell you, a year and a half ago, I would have never entertained that thought. But now that we're used to being flexible and we're thinking outside the box, we're looking at new ways of reaching the lost and bringing them into community so they can know Christ better.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Keith. What we're doing here, and I share with my guys, our elders, and we share with the church, we got to rethink the way we do church. Well, you got to rethink it. You got to reinvent, not the message, the method.
Yeah.
If you stay in that old mode. So now what I'm redefining, and we'll redefine, what does success look like?
Mm-hmm.
What does growth look like?
Yeah.
You don't measure growth at a church the same way you used to. We don't. I can't. I measure growth by how many people are there, how much money. Now we measure by how many people are online and there. Okay, how many lives are being reached. So now, here's what I shared at my church very briefly, you guys. Had COVID hit, 30 years ago, before technology, what would have happened to the church? What would have happened? So God in his infinite wisdom did not allow this to happen until there was a mechanism in place that we can globally reach people in spite of not being able. So if we would have 30 years ago, if you couldn't come to the building, what would have happened to the church? What would have happened to our giving? But technology, so the devil made a strategic mistake. When COVID came, he rejoiced thinking he would destroy the kingdom. And really the kingdom's expanded because more people hear about Christ now, I believe, than ever before because of the technology at our disposal. So we're measuring our success and our growth a little different. It's non-conventional. That's what I'm saying.
So what has stayed the same for us is that we never stopped meeting in a very real sense. We just met in small groups. What Wesley and Keith are talking about was we were blessed to have this in place already. What has changed for us is our online presence and being able to recreate small groups and macro groups. We're having people place membership with us from Kansas, New York, Missouri, Florida, Texas. There's 3 countries in Africa connected with us, and Colombia, Venezuela, Brazil, all around. So you're seeing a lot of opportunities, and we're taking those opportunities. And even if Satan does or whatever takes away technology, where the church will survive will not be in our large assembly. Where the church will survive will be in our small groups and house churches. That's where they'll survive and thrive, by the way. Because anywhere you look in the country, in Africa and China, so forth, the Christianity is growing exponentially there. While we're declining, it's growing exponentially there. One of the things that's causing that growth is basically a discipleship movement that engages in one-on-one and 2 to 3 and 4. It's actually honoring the one another passages in the scripture. You have 100 of those things about relationship, discipleship. Of those 100, 47 of those one another passages are actually instructions on how to love one another so they'll know you're my disciples. So that you can't overemphasize this idea of these groups, these family relationships. And it's not just Bible studies that you're doing. There needs to be a rhythm to it where you're actually serving together, you're actually studying together, you're actually having fun together socially. It really does need to be your family.
Developing community, developing a sense of family, of community is really, really key right now.
Y'all bringing in the idea of that community and family. And it's interesting that we had a conversation with our college ministry about how social media they came up with three impacts. One, that they see people not being able to have personal eye contact with others. 2, they don't, if they get into a hard conversation, they'll oftentimes just walk away. They won't even engage it. And 3, they were saying that they have a hard time sitting down and having an extended, logical, sequential conversation. And so y'all are hitting what's, I think, a loneliness factor that's growing because of social media, but yet we find these other ways to bring togetherness to play.
So, Stan, if I can interject one more thing here on groups. One of the fastest group types that's growing for us are intergenerational groups. That's more and more of our folks are getting it. And it's our young people that want to get in those intergenerational groups. Almost all the groups I'm involved with have 3 and 4 different age groups within it, and they're loving it. They are absolutely loving it. And talk about community, everything we do at North Bullard's community, it's either a learning community, a serving community, or a life community. So all of that is relational, intentional, catching the heart and the head in the hands of Jesus.
So hit those 3 items again, Joe, and then we'll get the results of our survey up.
Learning communities are pretty much your Bible classes, it's your group studies, it's Growing Kids God's Way, it's Financial Peace University. Anytime you're trying to equip yourself in the kingdom business or learning from God's word, serving communities are just exactly what they mean. They're your Meals on Wheels. They're your engagement in taking the gospel through a service, but you're always focused on taking the gospel through that process and building relationships. And of course, life discipleship communities, it's the heart, is really getting to the heart of Jesus and getting close to one another and having those really intimate, deep relationships where you can share and be very open and honest and helpful through people's struggles. You can laugh together, cry together, and it's a safe place to do it.
Very good. Caleb, if you have the answers to those poll questions, pull those up for us. So number one, most of us are looking at the 60 to 80% back. That seems to be across the country of people I've talked with and what I'm hearing from other groups. So 65%. That's good. All right, let's hit the next set, Caleb. All right, so 55% say we feel like we'll probably be about the same. That's a victory. That's a great victory. And 10% larger, 38%. And evangelistic outreach, increased expectations of our members, and more deliberate online presence all are pretty close in there. That's an excellent snapshot. Thank y'all. Well, Joe and Wesley and Keith, thank you so much. Great ideas, good energy. Glad that the Lord has been blessing what you're doing. And I'm going to turn things over to Mike to close us out.
Sorry, I had to find that mute button. Thank you, gentlemen. Wow. Wes and Joe, Stan, and Keith, this has been a very rich evening. Thank you for sharing this. I've taken a page and a half of notes here, and I write very small. There's just some great ideas that have come from each of you tonight. And I am encouraged because if the church, if you are representative of what is going to be happening in our fellowship, then the future is very bright. So thank you, each one of you, for your willingness to think outside the box and to think about ways that we can serve Christ in the day-to-day and not just on Sunday. I think that's the underlying theme between so much among a lot of these ideas, is that we just recognize that it's not all about 1 hour on Sunday morning, though that's not an unimportant hour. But thank you all for doing this tonight. I want to just remind us that there will be several more of these on the fourth Thursday of every month between now and August. The next one is on June the 24th. It will be, the topic title is Desperate to Return to Normal. We'll see what that produces as well. These forums are continuing to be listed on our Heritage 21 website. So if you know someone that you think ought to be hearing what took place tonight, have them go there. This will be posted, I'm sure within the next several hours, so that they could see that there. It also lists there the future topics and the dates for those. The times for those future ones will be announced by email. We're not certain of them until we get all the panels together and determine the best time for that. So on behalf of the Heritage 21 Foundation and the Christian Chronicle, thank you for participating tonight. We hope your being here has been a blessing to you, and I know it will be a blessing to our fellowship. Stan, do you have any last words you want to share?
Just Lord be praised, and let's keep pushing ahead.
All right, let me close this with a quick prayer. Father, thank you for this time together with these brothers tonight, people who are thinking Christ-like in the way that we approach one another, and the way that we serve our communities, and the way that we seek to find those who need Jesus. And so bless these conversations, but especially bless every congregation that is represented here tonight. May they be coming out of this pandemic in a way that is richer and fuller and more effective in spreading your gospel throughout the world and changing our lives for the better. We love you, Father. We thank you for Jesus. We thank you for what he did for us so that we might be your children. We pray this in his name. Amen. Thank you, brothers.